Hi, I'm Paul Carroll. I'm the editor-in-chief at Insurance Thought Leadership. I'm here today with one of the winners of the initial Global and Innovation Awards that we presented with the International Insurance Society late last year. That winner is represented by Jonathan Rake, who is the regional CEO for Swiss Re Corporate Solutions in the Asia Pacific region. And I wanted to just talk a little bit more about it. This particular award is one that's near and dear to my heart because we've been harping on the idea of predict and prevent at ITL for some time, and you won in that category. So, Jonathan, maybe you could just start us out by telling us a little bit about this risk data and services program that won the award.
Thanks, Paul. And yes, we were obviously very pleased to pick up the award at the Global Insurance Forum late last year. I think probably the best way to describe it is actually to explain what it is we are trying to achieve and a little bit of the background around our risk data services capability. And it really starts out with a few problem statements from a customer side, and maybe worth mentioning that when we're talking about customers here, we're primarily talking about corporates in the space that we're looking at. And so the background on this is obviously as we started to see more complex world, greater volatility, greater interconnectivity of risk. There shouldn't be new concepts to your your listener base. But we also saw some challenges for the big corporates with these changes. I think the first thing to highlight was the issue that they have around accessing and being able to quantify risk. And to be able to actually access relevant tools to do so. So that is something that we've seen as a challenge with our customer base. The second thing is, even if they have data, the data is often not good quality, and often is the case, it sits in very many different systems. So being able to access and standardize data to therefore be able to quantify risk, also a big challenge for a number of corporates. And then the third thing that we see is obviously is the need for these corporates that really want to be able to translate those insights into tangible value, to which that they obviously need to be able to be well organized, but also it's also about the partnerships that they have to better understand and utilize that information for the benefit of the organization. So a number of fundamental challenges, and really what we did is we pulled together a team from very many different parts of our organization. We had risk specialists, we had engineers, solution designers, business analysts, etc., to try and develop a solution from within our company that can help unlock some of these challenges. And that's really where the birth of RDS came. And simply put, the concept really is to build a digital twin of a corporate's assets to be able to get an accurate view of their specific vulnerabilities and risks and exposures. And for those that aren't familiar with the digital twin concept, probably the easy way to describe that or think about that is Google Earth. So Google Earth is a digital twin representation. It's not the real Earth. It's a representation of the Earth, and it constantly upgrades its data. But what that obviously allows you to do is stress test without damaging the planet. You can stress test scenarios against Google Earth and therefore determine number of different data points. And for us, it's around obviously looking at risks and vulnerabilities. So with this virtual representation of their business, companies can then really create these simulations based on real world scenarios, as I mentioned. And once that digital twin is in place, the risk managers, who are obviously often the people within the corporates that are looking at this topic around resilience, they can provide perform a variety of tasks on the platform. For example, one area we look at is around natural hazards and climate change. So a client can use our proprietary natural hazard and NatCat modeling engine to understand their risk profile. So by creating this capability, we've been able to solve a number of issues around, firstly, neutrality. So we can actually collaborate with a number of experts. The data belongs to the customer. It's their data. But now we can actually not only provide our own tools and models onto that digital twin, we can also invite others. We're not going to solve all the problems. When you're looking at resilience of companies and complex risk, many companies are going to have to participate and collaborate. So we didn't want to just sell Swiss Re's capabilities. We wanted to be able to create a capability and a platform where the best players are participating, and that's really the future. So openness, neutrality. And I think the biggest thing for us was deciding that, I call it turning ourselves inside out as an organization. We're really going to open up ourselves to utilize and use our own IP for the benefit of customers. And maybe just a last comment on that point. It actually started out here in the part of the world that I'm in. Is a group of people working in Japan and Singapore, some smart experts, and we're actually working with the Singapore government at the time to help them better understand their portfolio of assets and how that's going to respond to future climate change scenarios. And so what we realized is, hey, we invest a lot in climate science. Swiss Re spends a lot of money getting the best access to climate science. We then build models around that. We use that for our own underwriting, our own decisions on portfolios long term, how those portfolios are going to respond. Why wouldn't we use those as an example for the benefit of our customers? So that was kind of the birth of it, and then we've built the capability from there. That's just one sort of module area. So that's a bit of the background. That was really trying to, in the long term, make companies more resilient, but help them have a much better understanding of their own risk profiles in order to do so.
So that's great. I'm especially high on the concept of digital twins. I think they're great now, and they're only going to get better as the computing power gets better, and as the data being fed into them gets more real time and more extensive. You've already started to sort of get into where I wanted to go next, but I'll ask anyway about examples you have of particular success stories for clients, or any metrics you have to sort of show, where you were, where you are, where you're going, or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think firstly, obviously what we're trying to achieve here for customers is help them on their own path towards greater resilience. And the category that we won for was predict and prevent. We can't predict everything, but we can certainly prepare and prevent. And obviously, having a much greater understanding of your risk profile, not only today, but also how that's going to evolve is going to help you be better prepared and be able to prevent some of the scenarios. And so we kind of obviously measure ourselves based on how customers are improving their own resilience. And this isn't necessarily about reducing premiums, which may be one of the metrics that a customer might look at, because once they've got a better understanding of their risk, they can really determine if they're buying too much, too little insurance, which risk they want to offset, which they want to keep. So there's definitely a component of that. But it's really around that prevention piece. For us, when we look at metrics, obviously it's more around utilization, customer engagement, customers taking up the solutions, and we have some KPIs around that. And pleased to say we're on track in terms of the number of customers we're targeting, and in, let's say, 2023, and the value that we get out of that. But where we focus primarily in the early stages of adoption has been with our larger corporate customers and our key relationships. You've kind of obviously got access into the risk buyers, but also sometimes the C-suite of those organizations, and this was really the capability really does resonate with that. We've got a number of interesting user cases. I think there's basically three modules that we have in place today within RDS. The first is around property exposure management. This is really helps a risk manager understand and get insights into their core property exposures with complex tools and capabilities around that. Second is sustainability compass. I talked about the engagement here in Singapore. This has resonated with a number of companies. It helps clients really get a visibility into the threats of things like flooding and wildfires, storms, water scarcity, all the natural catastrophe hazards, but also understand how does that change with climate change and with a changing environment. What does that mean in terms of an overlay and an impact on their assets? And that's been good engagements with corporates around that. And the third piece is around supply chain resilience, which is allowing clients to uncover hidden vulnerabilities across their supply chain network and be able to simulate potential disruption. So those are kind of the three broad areas we're continuing to expand. And we've had engagements with clients across all of those. Just one recent example here in this region, we have a very large multinational construction company involved in the construction and development of major real estate assets, also the management of those assets and on a global portfolio. They had a very advanced supply chain perspective of their organization. They have a head of supply chain, good understanding of their parts suppliers, etc. But I actually joined the module when we were doing the demonstration, going through the module on the supply chain. The penny really dropped for this head of supply chain when they realized that you can actually not only see a static view today, but start to run those scenarios. So for example, on RDS, we will be able to, we have a lot of other data points in there. So we understand where all the ports are, if certain ports are down, which ports would need to be triggered for parts to go through. You can individually track single parts, but you can also relay things like political risk or disruptions in the system, not just disruptions to the actual part manufacturers, but other risks, flooding, coastal flooding, etc. What does that mean for distribution and part manufacturing in those areas? So once you've got that, and with the digital twin being able to run these scenarios, it really enabled this organization to then go to the C-suite and say, look, we're okay today, but we haven't thought of many different scenarios that could create huge vulnerabilities for our critical parts, for example. And so I think it's that ability to stress test for this particular company that was really unlocked the value for them. So depending where they are in their own sophistication, there's a different use case for each corporate.
Yeah, I love the examples of the flooding and how you can trace things through the supply chain. I often think back to how surprised CEOs in Silicon Valley were. I did a book that led to some talks, including one to a group of about 20 CEOs in Silicon Valley back in the late aughts, 2009, 2010. And there had been a flood in Thailand that had shut down production of a 10-cent rubber part that went into every personal computer that these guys made. And nobody could make personal computers because nobody realized how dependent everybody was on that one plant. So it was weeks before that plant got up and running again. And in the meantime, everybody was just stuck. So I can see that kind of knowledge is potentially profound.
Actually, a very you triggered a thought, because mentioning flood in Thailand, we obviously had the very significant floods in Thailand over a decade ago that caused huge disruption. And one of the things we saw there that's also value with what we do with RDS is everyone looking at the same data and having the same understanding of the risk. I wasn't working for Swiss Re at the time, but an organization I was working for, another part of the world, had global programs with significant assets in Thailand. The understanding was that there would be minimal exposure because you could cap for flood in Thailand, for example. Well, that's what you could do in that part of the world, but they didn't actually have those policies in Thailand, and so they didn't trigger. And so you had these exposures that were 10 times more than what we estimated. And so the value, it's just another example of the value of working with the same data sets on the same platform, and not just a sort of spaghetti minefield. Obviously helps you better manage your risk, not only from a customer perspective, but in our case from Swiss Re, from the organization itself as well.
So you've talked about the main areas you're focused on. I wonder if there's anything more in the way of a roadmap that you want to say about where you plan to go over the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever.
Yeah, so I mentioned the sort of 3 core capabilities, and it hasn't built 1, 2, 3. It actually went 10 back to 3 or something like that. We started with a number of things that we could do. And so we're not short on ideas, but we obviously really wanted to be driven by value from the customers. So before we launched, we really went through a number of potential, because if you think about, so I think the one key message I'd give is you can't just deliver this unless you've got your data in order in-house. And we had to go through a number of years of actually getting to that. We call it the single source of truth. So when I talk about turning ourselves inside out, for us to be able to provide our tools and capabilities, we've got to have our own single source of truth. And the way big multinationals, as you know, are built is lots of bolt-ons, and you get lots of different systems. And so we worked with a third-party external company for a number of years to really get the single sort of source of truth, our data foundation. Once you've got that, you've got scale that you can then build technologies, and everyone's looking at the same data. And so that gave us, let's say, the right to play, to then start to obviously work with RDS for customers, and to utilize our own assets for the benefit of other organizations. So that's super important. You've got to get house in order. You've got to get your own data sorted before you can take that next step. So once we did that, we've obviously determined that these 3 areas that I spoke about are the right place for us to start, but there's way to go. And I think if I just give some examples of where I think I could see it going. So firstly, loss prevention and reduction, that's one area I've talked about. You consider, we've actually got a client, if you consider a global power generation and distribution company, the diverse portfolio of thousands of assets worldwide that they're using our RDS loss prevention program. So what that does today is it allows them to basically have an estimate on their losses using risk scores that the company's identified and assessed all their natural catastrophe risks across all their assets, identify where maybe the biggest losses would occur on specific perils, earthquakes, floods, typhoons, etc. So now they prioritize. They know where they need to put most of their resilience program, their risk engineering efforts. So today, that would be an example of us being able to, Swiss Re being able to help with understanding where the hazards are. But where I could see that going down the line, thinking about the future, well, what if you actually started to build in all your risk engineering capabilities into that space for that customer, where they can actually trigger immediate actions for prevention or remediation on certain hazards occurring or certain issues happening. Not only that, but what if we could actually link the data and let's say capabilities of other organizations to be triggered at the same time. So that's where this openness on the platform really allows us scope to become, almost like at the heart of an ecosystem rather than just providing our own hazard analysis. Another example, obviously we look at it retention and transfer. So this is what I mentioned earlier around companies utilizing the data. They've got a better understanding of their risks. Now they can make better informed decisions around what they want, what risks they want to keep in their company, and what they want to offset to insurance companies, as an example. So today we do that, and we have some very large companies are making those decisions. But I think where I could see that going in the future is if you really start to embed that and it gets utilized by many different players, it can actually potentially bring much greater contract certainty and simplicity in the whole process of insurance buying. You think about long-term relationships, it could really build the trust and make an annual renewal cycle a lot easier if everyone has the same data and working with the same tools. That will make the process a lot more straightforward, and you will bring greater certainty. And I think you'll know from your space and working in the space, contract certainty has been a big challenge around our industry and when you're talking about multiple players. So today, it might help them make better decisions with what they're dealing with, but I would love to see this, and I could see the future where it builds long-term arrangements that make for a more simpler, more certain process around their insurance buying behavior as well. And then maybe just a third one to touch on would be avoidance. So I think we've got examples. I used the real estate company. We've got examples today where certainly companies are utilizing the information and insights from RDS to make decisions around assets. This could be determining where to place assets. It could be thinking about actions that they need to take to improve their resilience on portfolios. If we roll forward a few years, I could definitely see this as a tool in the boardroom, because it does give you that totality view on risks. So a board will have lots of different departments and areas coming to them with different views on scenarios and opportunities and challenges and risks. RDS could be a platform where it gives them a whole view of risk that then helps them make much bigger decisions around things like mergers and acquisitions and long-term sustainability across projects. So I definitely see it moving towards being of greater value for that, the leadership of an organization or the strategic decision maker, not just tactical asset based. So yeah, that's some examples how we could probably see this evolving.
So that's great. I wonder if you could zoom out a little bit now to talk about this whole concept of predict and prevent. I've always been struck how many people tell me they fell into insurance. I tell people I'm the person they've met who intended to go into insurance. After a long career at the Wall Street Journal, mostly covering technology, I became a partner in a consulting firm that pioneered the idea of digital strategy, and I've been doing books on innovation ever since. And I decided insurance was fertile territory about 10 years ago. So I deliberately got into insurance because I believed in what the industry was doing and saw a lot of potential. And from the beginning, I've thought that nobody wants to buy insurance. Everybody wants peace of mind. They want protection or whatever. So this idea of predict and prevent, or prepare and prevent, or some other variations on the term that I've heard, is one that resonates a lot with me. And I just wonder how far you think the industry can go in terms of switching to that sort of model and moving away from the traditional repair and replace.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good examples of where we're starting to move towards more prevention, but I think we've got a long way to go. I remember reading a report. This would have been, some time ago, a decade ago, which was done in Asia, where I think 1 out of every $10 was spent on natural catastrophes was spent on the prevention, and $9 spent on the remediation. And so that just tells you how much opportunity there is. We also know that there's huge insurance gaps. So a lot of the time it's citizens or governments that pick up the bill for a lot of major events and issues, because sometimes it's just a lack of understanding of the value of insurance, and too many people falling into insurance and the branding, and you go into that whole space. So there's a lot that can be done. I think with the complexity and the increase in impact of these risks and the awareness that's gone up significantly, I think it's shifting a lot more towards prevention action. And if you just think about the climate topic, that's a really good example. I think data helps, makes a huge difference, because you can actually start to trust data and also share data and partner with data, and that allows you to make much better informed decisions around prevention. And just to give you an example of that, if we take the climate topic, so a company 5-10 years ago, they would have had to worry about, do they have cover maybe for natural catastrophes? Are they covered for a cyclone, typhoon in this part of the world or in the US? Do they have some earthquake cover in California? Now what that organization needs to think about is not only is it covering for natural catastrophe, it needs to think about disclosures, from a group perspective. It needs to think about its employees. It needs to think, in many cases for companies, about energy transition. There's so many different themes that go around the climate that an organization needs to think about, not just is it covered for some natural catastrophe. It also needs to think about how those risks are evolving, which I talked about earlier, and what's in the natural catastrophe landscape going to do to my portfolio in 20 years, not just today. Back that time, an organization might need to go and speak to 10 different participants in an insurance company and outside. But the starting point is, who do you even go and speak to, and how do you navigate that world? So something like the RDS platform allows you, obviously, to bring all of that into one place and deal with one individual. It's like a quarterback that can then navigate. So I think with the improvements in data capabilities, quantifying risk, understanding of risk, this ability to now be open and have many players participating, you're going to see a move towards better prevention and better prevention capabilities, and that's got to be the way we go. And it can be small things like obviously actions that individuals or companies take on their own risk, or it can be really the industry reacting as a whole, instead of just looking at it through an individual player's lens. So I see us moving in the right direction. Good examples. There's still a lot of opportunity in that space.
Yeah, one of the things I learned in Silicon Valley is a line: never confuse a clear view with a short distance. And I think there's a fairly clear view here, but there is not a short distance.
Absolutely, and it's
so
changing all the time, obviously, as well.
Right. So any final thoughts? That covers everything I wanted to cover.
No, I think that's good. I think I sort of obviously just wanted to sort of leave the point that this is it's a challenge for our industry. This isn't a challenge we're trying to resolve ourselves for our customers, and so we are looking to obviously not only promote our brand with this capability, but actually have others help us stress test and improve the capability and partner and participate with us. And so I think that's a different way of working for us, and therefore I'm happy to engage further on the topic, and whether that's with customers, partners, competitors, industry players, we all have the same challenges here, and so that's the key theme in how we're looking at this going forward, improving resilience for our customers.
So thanks so much for taking the time. Again, congratulations on the award. I look forward to seeing your filing next year, because you've now raised the bar for yourselves, and you have to come in with something even better next year. So thanks, Jonathan.
see if I get the personal invite back. But thank you, and thanks for your time.